Hi, Meekness Fan here. As you probably know, I've been avidly following the SEGA Ages Switch releases over the past year and covering each of them on this very channel. By now though, we've already received most of the announced lineup. Puyo Puyo 2 is imminent in Japan, and behind it are Thunder Force AC, G-Lock Air Battle, Herzog 2, and Sonic 2. With most of it behind us, it's had me wondering what we could possibly see next. Will they simply stop after these announced titles, or take a break and come back with more? And if the latter, what games will they be? So I started putting together this wish list of games, but to keep it interesting for everyone, I decided to set a few rules. Firstly, I only let myself pick one game per console because otherwise this video would just be a Dreamcast roll call. Secondly, I only went for titles that Sega owned. This made the 32X particularly difficult, but I wanted to keep this video vaguely realistically possible. Thirdly, I skipped any arcade-centric releases since it was easier to block this list off by consoles. And finally, I tried to think of a realistic Ages mode for each game. Nothing wild or too out there, and maybe not even that interesting, but I mostly looked at what M2 had already done for prior releases and adapted them to these titles. These restrictions made this list fun to put together, so hopefully it makes it more fun for you to tell me I picked all the wrong games in the comments. Starting off, I'm already being cheeky by beginning at the Genesis since that's where my familiarity starts. Shining Force has been one of my favorite games ever since I played it as a kid on the Dreamcast Smash Pack Volume 1. If you're unfamiliar, it's a tile-based strategy RPG comparable to Fire Emblem, with a boilerplate story and pretty standard characters. But the whole thing is draped with a wonderful 90s anime charm and pleasant simplicity that has made it irresistible to me ever since I first experienced it. This choice is probably a bit of a waste as Shining Force is currently playable in the Genesis collection on the Switch, but the heart wants what it wants, and my heart is always wanting more Shining Force. I'd love to see some difficulty sliders and a rewind option to help offset any mistakes made during battle. The one differentiation from the existing release on Switch would be the Ages mode. I'd love to be able to start the game with all of the characters unlocked. See, in Shining Force, you recruit all sorts of warriors and mages to your cause to save the land, some of them with obtuse unlock requirements. Similar to how Game Ground's release lets you start the game with everyone, being able to rock the early game with late game characters like Musashi would be a dream come true for me. And to aim for the stars a bit, maybe we could even get the GBA version as a bonus, or just have the GBA version be the sole focus to help differentiate it from the version on the Switch collection. I'll take what I can get. That brings us to the 32X, which didn't have many titles to choose from. I would have loved to say Star Wars Arcade is a curveball, but it's a licensed title, so I settled for the much more predictable Knuckles Chaotix. It's an odd pick for me as I think it's just alright as a game, but it feels weird to me that the only Knuckles game is stuck in the past through complicated means, and in an ideal world, more Sonic games would be easily accessible in the modern era than not. As a classic Sonic title with a really weird presentation and gimmick though, I think it fits well into the weird side of SEGA Ages. Some of its releases have been the usual classics, and some have been the oft-forgotten oddities of their times, like Ichidant R. I just feel it'd be a great notch in this line's belt and would help get some more eyes on the project in general. My idea for the Ages mode is a bit more involved on the programming end, I imagine, but I think a way to play the game more traditionally would help ease in newcomers. Being able to just select whichever characters you want and play through a curated sequential zone order would be a help. Really though, I'd just take even a straight port of Knuckles Chaotix at this point. One way or another it needs to get off the 32X, I just prefer it to be this way. Moving along to the Sega Saturn, the game I chose here is in a very similar vein, Burning Rangers. My Sonic fan side really shows sometimes. There's so many great Saturn games that all deserve to be more accessible. It really is a treasure trove of untapped gems, but to me, this feels like the right initial pick. It's very possibly the most forgotten Sonic Team title to ever see an international release. Except for maybe the Rub Rabbits or Astro Boy. My view is biased, but I just feel it's a shame to see a title from the minds behind Sonic lost to time. Like I said, it's very similar to Knuckles Chaotix in that way. It's a little more egregious to me though, thanks to its inclusion in All-Stars Racing Transformed. I feel like people are familiar with that jamming music track, but have been left wondering what the game is really all about. The Saturn is notoriously tricky to emulate, and its games tend to be much more expensive to get secondhand, so an inclusion in the Ages series makes the most sense to me. I've long dreamed of a non-Sonic Sonic Team collection game, but this seems more likely. Now, I won't lie, the game doesn't feel great to play in 2019, and I'm not sure any of M2's top layer solutions could really improve things much. If they could make the camera free of movement, it would be a start, but trying to keep things realistic here, the main reasons the game feels a bit poor are simply ingrained, I imagine. With that, my idea for an Ages mode lines up with M2's trend in making games easier to play across the lineup. I think an infinite health mode might alleviate frustration for first-time players. This way they can still go through and experience the game, seeing what it has to offer. The real thing I'd hope for with Burning Rangers is a remake of the game similar to the one Knights got on PS2, but seeing as how that was talked about after the Knights HD port and didn't go anywhere, my hopes aren't high for it. Fingers crossed we see Burning Rangers again someday. Like I said earlier, picking a single Dreamcast game was a Herculean effort, so I opted to pick an unusual title after thinking about which styles of game I wished were in the Ages lineup. The Switch is perfect for taking it anywhere and playing with a friend, and I just really wanted a classic Sega co-op beat-em-up. Dynamite Cop seemed the perfect fit. I'm cheating a bit here as it was initially an arcade release, but much like Crazy Taxi, I feel like it's well known enough for being on the Dreamcast. If you don't know, Dynamite Cop is the sequel to Die Hard Arcade. Honestly, the loss of the license hurts nothing here. It's just full-blown, dumb, late 90s fun, where you pick one of 3 characters to rescue the president's daughter on a cruise ship. I'm thankful for tons of ways to play Streets of Rage with anyone I'd like just about anywhere, but it's time for Dynamite Cop to shine. I'd love for its sequel to be packed in too, as it was only ever released in arcades, but realistically just Dynamite Cop on its own is more than enough. As for Ages enhancements, I'm actually at a bit of a loss. I would think Infinite Continuous would be a given, so maybe just the basics like a rewind and harder difficulty are in order, on top of online matchmaking for co-op. I'd be very interested to see what M2 could come up with, as the game is a pretty finite, defined experience that doesn't leave much room for enhancements. Please play Dynamite Cop. Now, in a post-Dreamcast world, my next wishlist item is also pretty selfish, but hey, it's my wishlist, what do you expect? There's already an Outrun game in the lineup, but I want to be able to take Outrun 2006 Coast to Coast anywhere. It's one delightful package, as a reimagining of the first game and including Outrun 2's levels alongside races and challenges. A 60 FPS release of this on the Switch would be such a dream come true for me. Not many games capture pure fun the way Outrun does, and this game is practically cream of the crop. Drifting your way along the course's roads like threading a needle to these vibrant colors and a superb soundtrack is just gaming euphoria. It's been long enough, and if we can't get a new Outrun anytime soon, having one of the best available so easily would be the next best thing. I really can't praise it enough. It's so good that it's more than earned its spot, despite the original already being in the Sega Ages lineup. Much like Dynamite Cop, I think the only thing to add would be an online connection. Coast to Coast was already built with online modes in mind. I think even if the community isn't active, having the option would be better than axing it. An infinite timer and perhaps a new music remix or two are really all I'd want. If they put this game out each console generation, I'd happily buy it again and again. Can you tell that I like this game? I'd almost stopped myself there, as the PS3 and 360 generation feels a bit odd to expect a release from due to file sizes and other oddities, and I'd wanted to save handheld releases and such for another day. Then I realized the digital download scene from that time period gave me an out. Afterburner Climax. It was released digitally for those consoles, but was eventually removed since it licenses real-world fighter jets, which is a bummer and would potentially realistically preclude it from a Sega Ages release. However, over on Sega's mobile brand, Sega Forever, Afterburner Climax was actually released again this year, and you can play it right now. which is pretty cool. I'd love to play it on a bigger screen though, and as someone without a tablet or Apple TV, the Switch feels like the next best fit for me. I also feel it's especially potent as Afterburner is just as much a Sega classic as any, but doesn't get as many re-releases due to the licensing, I imagine. With it already being relicensed for the mobile space, this feels like the best time to get an Afterburner entry back out to console gamers. There's really nothing quite like them, and Climax is still the most recent entry in the series, coming up on nearly a decade of existence. The arcade-style titles are a wonderful fit for both SEGA Ages and the Switch, and this would be a great way to slip in a more modern title into the lineup while having classic sensibilities. And frankly, Afterburner just deserves better than to wither. I feel I've suggested this for every Ages mode, but it really lines up with what M2 tend to do. Make games easier, but a more forgiving timer and damage system would really help ease new players in. I'd love to see an enhanced jet fighter that can deal more damage too, and I bet M2 would try to do something charming to emulate the arcade cabinet experience. Either way, Afterburner is a classic edge-of-your-seat type of game, and I'd love to see it represented somehow in this series. And those are a few of my most desired games for the SEGA Ages series. I don't think any of them were really obvious choices, which I quite like in retrospect. Of course I'd love to see titles like Sonic Adventure, Jet Set Radio, Streets of Rage, etc., but if I had it my way, these are the ones I would pick. Perhaps sometimes I'll make a follow-up video with a few more selections and covering Sega systems I didn't in this video. Let me know down below if you'd like that, and what games you'd like to see in the future from the lineup. But if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to subscribe if you haven't already, and otherwise, try and take it easy. And of course, another thank you to my very wonderful patrons.